Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, peak oil. Are we there yet? Or has the world really got resources to last hundreds of years? From tar sands to fracking, shale to methane hydrate, we look at the global picture as the new smaller players open up the energy world. Also this week, mining in Zambia, the winners and losers, as Lusaka says it's not benefiting from its mineral wealth. And we speak to a so-called ethical miner of gemstones, which has been caught up in the dragnet. And the brain race, why Europe and the United States are spending billions to map what's inside our heads. Hello everyone, we're looking at something called peak oil this week, an idea which has been around really since the 1950s. These days though, the debate centres on whether oil has or hasn't yet reached its peak, given we've extracted so much oil and that reserves are declining as well. But as new extraction techniques evolve, things like fracking, tar sands, deep water drilling, do we really have fuel that could last for centuries? Well, this is where we are currently. This is according to the International Energy Agency. They reckon more than 95% of all oil in the world has already been discovered, and that half of those total reserves of 2.5 trillion barrels have already been consumed. That's because we, as an entire planet, consume 85 million barrels of oil every day. But the IEA also sends a word of caution that the world shouldn't consume more than a third of fossil fuel reserves before the year 2050, so as to avoid catastrophic levels of climate change. But still, the hunt for fuels goes on, alternative fuels especially. And in a world first, resource-challenged Japan says it's extracted gas from offshore deposits of a substance known as burnable ice. Now, the environmental impact of this process is not yet fully understood, but production could be the answer to Japan's growing energy needs. Gerald Tan takes a look at that for us now.
A flame of hope in the Pacific Ocean off Japan's coast. The flare is an indication of burning gas. The company responsible for this exploration is hailing it as a breakthrough. The first time natural gas has been extracted from offshore deposits of something called methane hydrate. The substance is essentially gas that's been trapped in an icy cage of water molecules. Although it looks like packed snow, it burns like a candle when heated, earning it the nickname of flammable ice and even fire ice.
In recent years, pilot tests have succeeded in extracting gas from methane hydrates found under land ice or permafrost. But most of the planet's deposits lies offshore. In this latest trial, a Japanese vessel drilled into an area 1,000 meters deep. When it reached a layer of deposits 300 meters below the seabed, it lowered the pressure, causing the methane and ice to separate before finally piping the gas to the surface.
This is potentially game-changing technology. Carbon from methane hydrates worldwide is believed to be double that found in all of Earth's fossil fuels. The current exploration is focused around the Nankai Trough off Aichi and Mie prefectures. The area here alone is thought to hold enough reserves to satisfy domestic consumption anywhere from 10 to 100 years.
Natural resources are expected to grow scarcer in the years to come, so this is an absolutely essential development for Japan.
The exploration company says it's aiming for production to become commercially viable within 6 years. For Japan, now the world's largest importer of liquefied natural gas, that day can't come soon enough. Gerald Tan for Counting the Cost.
Now, a feature of these new discoveries are the new smaller operators who are actually doing the discovering. Now, Tethys Petroleum is a good example, just uncovered 28 billion barrels of oil in Tajikistan, and its executive chairman, David Robson, is with us from Dubai. David, I wonder if you wouldn't mind putting on your geologist's hat first. You know, are we, with these sorts of new finds, actually pushing back the date of hitting peak oil? Are these making tangible differences?
Well, I think peak oil is not just about oil availability and production, it's also about price. And as prices increase, then the time to peak oil moves forward. And certainly with the advance in new technologies with respect, for example, to tight oil, tight gas, and other technologies for drilling in deeper water, etc., certainly the amount of oil available is there to be found. It's just a matter of price. So certainly for the next few years, it's not really going to be about peak oil in terms of volume. It's going to be a price-driven formula, I would say.
Exactly, because you wouldn't really see the price of oil making much movement, would you? It's been very well settled up above $100 for quite a time now.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is to do with where we are on the, call it the cost-reward balance currently. Right now, in order to actually produce quantities of unconventional oil and gas, well, certainly unconventional oil, the price needs to be of the order of where it is. Certainly, I would say around about $100 a barrel. If the price goes up too much, you're going to see a reduction in demand generally, and there'll be a little time to catch up. So I think it's balanced right now between the cost to extract the new oil, if you like, because we are seeing decline in conventional oil reservoirs, and allied against the reluctance from a world economic perspective to see oil prices go too high, which would slow down economies and therefore reduce the demand for oil. So it's a balance right now, I would suggest.
Okay then, the other, let's call it a byproduct of new oil finds, is at least the idea of energy independence. Is that possible, do you think? You know, countries like the US talk about being energy independent one day. Do you think it could actually happen?
Well, certainly in terms of gas, they are making very big strides towards that. Gas production, and almost entirely new gas being brought on from unconventional sources, that's shale gas, has showed significant increases over the last few years, and I believe will continue. So certainly in terms of gas, I believe the US will become not just self-sufficient, but potentially an exporter of natural gas. Oil is a little bit more of a difficult question to answer, as we still are in the relatively early days of the tight oil revolution in the US. But we've seen production increase rapidly in states such as Texas and places that really had very small amounts of production, such as North Dakota in the past. So I think with the right technology being applied, certainly somewhere like the US could become self-sufficient over the next few years. Quite how long that would last is another matter, because we will then see the decline in these new reservoirs, and they will therefore need to be maintained and increased. So there may be a blip where you have, call it energy independence, but then it will go back to more of a global picture for the US and obviously other countries that are following that stream also.
Okay, David, let's look more even at what your company is doing. What was it, 28 billion barrels of oil discovered in Tajikistan? I mean, that's great for you. Tell me, though, how did you manage to get in there ahead of the bigger oil players?
Well, I think an independent such as us has a lot of advantages working in areas which were previously, let's say, white areas on the map, areas where there hadn't been much exploration. To an extent, you can almost look on this as unconventional. Places like Tajikistan in the past really hadn't been explored that much, and of course, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, there was quite a lot of civil unrest there, and that put off a lot of people looking. The big companies, the majors and the super majors, tend to want to see more stability before they'll move into these places, and also more data, more confidence, because they certainly will not take the risks that independents will take to get into these areas early. And I think that's one of the reasons that independents succeed in these places, and not just Tajikistan, but other places globally. It's a mixture of taking more risk, but nowadays, of course, with the access to technology available pretty much for everyone, we can apply the same technology, but as I say, with a much more dynamic approach and cheaper, and as I say, we're prepared to take a lot more risk.
And what about actually doing business in Tajikistan? It is a place which has, shall we say, authoritarian rule, can I use that phrase? And is not the only country in that part of the world or beyond which has that. How do you as a company deal with that level of control and that style of rule? Does it, affect what you want to do there?
Well, certainly with regard to Tajikistan, I think Tajikistan, of course, there's never really been any and still hasn't been any real deep exploration there. So we saw the potential in that basin below a layer of salt, which is extremely productive horizons below that layer in, for example, Turkmenistan next door. And so we made a decision to move in there. Now, I have spent, goodness me, since 1990 working in the former Soviet Union, if you like, so a long, long time. Really, with Tajikistan, they themselves were determined to see their country moving forward. And I think to a large degree, it was the push coming right from the very top to put in place international systems such as production sharing, which we brought into the country back in 2007, to push forward with other international agreements such as, for example, the World Trade Organization, which Tajikistan is one of the very few of the former Soviet states now to have joined. But these need a lot of positive push from the very top. And in many ways, to have a strong government is really what you need in these environments, because they're able to follow a route, if you like, which enables the development of their resources and the development of the nation, which I think the people on the street in Dushanbe, for example, fully appreciate as they move forward, which they are very much.
David Robson from Tethys Petroleum. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And still ahead on Counting the Cost, creating and mapping the brain on a computer, complete with emotions, feelings and thoughts. Science fiction or reality? We'll look at that a little later on. Now, the Zambian government is getting tough on international mining companies, accusing many of them of not paying their taxes. In fact, it's demanding they return money to the country. Miles Sampa, who is Zambia's Deputy Finance Minister, told the Financial Times, at the moment the situation is win on one side. Only the shareholders are winning. The people of Zambia are still in abject poverty. Why? Because, and stop me if you've heard this before, Zambia's mineral wealth is not really contributing to the country's economy. Take tax, for instance. Zambia is accusing multinational mining companies of using legal avoidance measures to escape $2 billion a year in taxes. And the country's revenue from mining, that was only 3.8% of gross domestic product in 2012. If better managed, the mining money could perhaps help the more than 60% of the population who live below the poverty line. Well, Zambia is also taking aim at the ethical gemstone company Gemfields. It wants the company to sell the gems it mines in Zambia within Zambia. Currently, they're sold in India and Singapore, where most of the demand comes from. In Zambia, Gemfields owns 75% of the world's largest emerald mine. The government owns the other 25% of it. Well, joining me from London is the Chief Executive of Gemfields, Ian Harbottle. Let's talk, first of all, Ian, about what the Zambian government is up to. The tax issue is one thing, but, you know, what they want you specifically to do, creating a market within Zambia instead of exporting. Are you willing to go along with that? Are you happy with that?
Yes, certainly. Gemfields is in partnership with the government of Zambia in the Kagem mine. The Kagem mine has been running for more than 30 years and spent most of that time bankrupt or without profits and significant losses. Gemfields came in 2008, and together with our partners, the government of Zambia, we've turned it into a successful mine, a profitable mine, and we've helped build the Zambian emerald industry. We're very proud of our partnership. We think it's a great project. Our concern to date has been lack of clarity from the government. To date, in the media, various statements have been made claiming that the president has made certain directives, etc. We as a company have asked for clarity on that, and during our discussions with some of the ministers, they've told us one thing and something different in the media. So what we as a company, while it might not always look the same, what we're saying is we want clarity, we want certainty, we want direction, because that's important for business, certainly for us, but for all businesses. But it is something that is possible if done in the right way.
So you believe it can make a difference for the Zambian people? Obviously, that's what the Zambian government is talking about. They're saying, why should all of our riches go overseas? Our country, our people should see the benefit of it too. Is this your, as you call it, ethical mining in process here?
Definitely. Gemfield's whole business focus is on ethical gemstones, ethical mining, and that's partly of our concern. If you look at the moment, since Gemfields has been involved with Cargem, we're responsible for exporting approximately 40% of the declared emeralds, yet we're responsible for about 98% of the cash that has come back into the country and about 99.9% of taxes and royalties that are paid because of the emerald sector. So what we're saying is we've been doing it in such a way, we've increased the price we've achieved for our Zambian emeralds by tenfold over the last 4 years. I think to some extent their focus has been on us, where the focus should really be on the rest of the sector. What we would hate to see is a situation where, in trying to change it on behalf, or supposedly on behalf of the people, one ends up punishing the law abider and rewarding the law breaker. Law should always be there to support the law abider and punish the law breaker, and it needs to be done in the right way. So we've certainly in talks with the government, and we hope that those will continue in such a way that what really happens is that Zambia as a nation, the Zambian emerald industry, continues to grow and develop, and not necessarily just individuals or certain parties within the country.
Interesting, Ian, you talk about law abiding and law breaking, because that kind of covers the tax issue, which I mentioned before. The thing is, this tax avoidance is legal. There are legal loopholes, that these companies have used to avoid paying some of their taxes. Now, you know, you quite rightly say, well, the Zambian government is going after their taxes and going after this money. Do you think they're going to have success? You know, like, say, Starbucks in Europe?
Correct. Yeah, you know, I totally support that. You know, we as a company, we build a whole business model on being 100% transparent, 100% ethical, environmental, socially supporting, etc. And we believe in it. It's who we are. But we certainly believe that there are individuals or some companies or some single companies within a sector that are responsible for breaking taxes. But what one has to happen is one must focus on that company per se and not label the whole sector. I mean, we ourselves, last year we paid more than 16 million in taxes and royalties to the government of Zambia. I think that a year is more than they've received from the emerald industry if you add up all the last 20 years put together. Companies like ourselves and these other copper miners, etc., we believe we should be thanked and rewarded and promoted, not just painted with the same tar brush. So it is something that's important to be done, but I do believe it should be done in the right way, and one continues to focus on the real challenge and not get distracted by sideline issues.
It's central to pretty much everything you've said, actually, the ethics of what you do. Yeah. Clearly you are a company who is doing something for Zambia and giving back to the country, but you know, this whole idea of a mining company actually being ethical in the first place, I wonder if there's some sort of disconnect there. You've gone into a country, you mine its mineral wealth, you export it to the big markets, but then you talk about the ethics of it all. You know, isn't it in the end that you're just taking one and offsetting it against the other?
Yeah, not really. I mean, it's that question that you ask is, you know, at the face value, it's highly emotive, and a lot of people would say that. But you must remember, what are we mining? We're mining emeralds. Now, this emeralds is a luxury good. It's not a food. It's not a fuel. It's not a clothing. It's not a medicine. There's no inherent value in the product per se. I believe the real thing with ethics is bringing it out in the right way, in such a way that you leave the environment better than you found it. And from this respect, we're working with the World Land Trust. We as a company are not just working on environmental compliance, but we're working on what they call biodiversity, which is not just making it back to the way you found it, but making it back how it should be. We inherited a mine that had been run for 30 years, as I said, largely bankrupt. It was in a mess. We've transformed many of the old pits into lakes. We've fed them with fish. It becomes a sustaining farming environment. There were lots of old dumps. We're in the process of planting 300,000 trees on those dumps, turning them into hills and mountains, and that's just one. We're doing schools and clinics. So the whole idea is to get the minerals out of the ground in a way that you leave the environment at least the same, if not better off. You leave the people through training, skills and development better off, and you make sure that you don't rob the country, but you get it to the world market, so the vast majority of the wealth comes back to the country. You know, it's, as I said, your question is, you know, overall it's easily hyped up from an emotional point of view, but very easily explained. As I say, I don't believe it's ethical if you've got a country with a lot of potential wealth and you just leave it down in the ground. It's not good to anybody, and certainly if the country doesn't benefit or grow. So it's how you manage that growth and development.
Ian Harbottle from Gemfields talking ethical mining with us. Ian, thank you for that. Now finally this week, can we invest in our brains? Well, we could look after them. You can do a daily crossword, eat lots of omega-3 oils, but I'm talking about really investing in them. See, the European Commission's handed out $1.5 billion to build a computer model of the human brain. And the US is planning to spend over $3 billion on brain research in the coming years. Nick Spicer put his thinking cap on for us, and he came out with this.
The brains behind big science have a new object of study: the human brain itself. In Europe, the Human Brain Project is so vastly ambitious that, on paper at least, it could change computing, medicine, even philosophy and how we view ourselves. The project's centerpiece? A supercomputer model of the human brain, built up from individual molecules, to neurons, to thoughts and emotions.
Society, we will all benefit from each of us understanding our brain better.
It's a scientific project that cuts across academic disciplines to bring together neuroscientists, doctors, and computer engineers.
We need to do a phase shift in how we approach the brain, because the brain is so complex. There are so many different experts and expertise that are required. We actually need to be able to have a new culture of how we study the brain collectively, collaboratively.
This is the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, which is coordinating more than 80 European and international research institutes involved in the Human Brain Project. It will last more than a decade and cost more than $1.5 billion. But researchers involved say it will be worth every penny.
Because it costs around $1.5 billion and takes around 13 years to develop a new brain drug, pretty much the same numbers as for the project itself. If it works, the Human Brain Project could enable many clinical trials to be conducted on its supercomputer, instead of on thousands of lab rats or human volunteers.
We certainly think that one of the big spin-offs of this should be a faster, more focused, more targeted way of identifying drug targets in humans and then tackling the diseases quite specifically because we know what they're due to.
Around 3% of the budget is being spent on ethics, so people like lawyers and philosophers can look at the moral implications of the Human Brain Project, because the science cuts to the very heart of what it means to be human, with implications that are almost impossible to predict.
I feel much better now. I really do.
So far, only science fiction has really explored the idea of what a computer brain with thoughts and feelings might be like, and might mean morally for people. The Human Brain Project brings its own set of problems. It will use information gathered about patients in hospitals around the world. That raises the question of data privacy. But the doctor in charge of possible medical applications says the costs outweigh the benefits.
My big hope is that we will improve people with the real plagues of the current era, which are the mental diseases, depression, schizophrenia and so on, and the diseases of old age, those which rob us of our personality, our memory and everything else that defines us as human.
And it's not just Europe that's running in the brain race.
Today, our scientists are mapping the human brain to unlock the answers to Alzheimer's.
While it doesn't have a computer brain project, the United States is committing over $3 billion to gathering data about the brain.
Now is the time to reach a level of research and development not seen since the height of the space race.
There are critics who say it's all a waste of money, or the money could be better spent. But the people leading the giant research projects into the brain say you can't know until you try.
The opportunities are just incredible, both for technology, for industries, for economies, the understanding new health systems, developing new computers, developing new robots. There's an enormous wealth that is lying there, and I think that a brain race will be a very healthy thing for society as a whole.
The brain researchers like to call their work a moonshot, and to compare the idea of a computerized brain to a telescope. You'll never know what the stars look like, they say, until you build one. Nick Spicer, Counting the Cost, Lausanne.
And that is our show for this week, but there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/business. That's where you'll find the latest business headlines and a link to the Counting the Cost page where you can watch this or any of our previous episodes again. And then if you'd like to get in touch, very simple. You can either tweet me at KamalAJE or our business editor at Abid Oliver Ali, or just drop us an old-fashioned email. countingthecost@aljazeera.net is the address. But that is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santa Maria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.